Welcome back. I am John P. Today we have a very special guest, Eric Wind of Wind Vintage. How are you?
Good to see you, John P.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for stopping in. And what Eric has brought with us from his collection, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Or offerings.
Some are for sale, but yes.
Right.
Yep.
He has brought some very special Rolex watches that we are going to be sharing with you. We're going to be talking about them, but also we're going to go under the lens and showing you some close-ups because they're very special for a certain reason. They're in a collection that is often overlooked. And what is this, Eric?
These are the Rolex watches made for Domino's Pizza franchise owners who hit their targets.
So in the United States, there's a pizza company, and they put the logos on these watches.
Yes,
and they have
Domino's, starting supposedly going back as far as the 1970s. Typically, we begin to see them in the 80s.
Amazing.
And kind of mid-80s, it became much more popular, I would say, in terms of what I see out there. And it's used to be one of the least valuable Rolex watches, period.
Absolutely.
And they've kind of skyrocketed the last 2 years, I would say.
Developed a cult following.
They have. So I wanted to, since we have 4 here today, kind of discuss the evolution of the Rolex Domino's Pizza watches, and just to kind of give the collector perspective on what you should see when you're looking for one.
Well, I'm excited, but before we do that, what do you have on your wrist today? I'm sure everyone wants to know.
Rolex Datejust, which is kind of cool. It's from 1990 with Tiffany & Co.
Is that a 1601?
This is not. It's a 16234.
16234.
But it's one of the last Rolex watches with the Tiffany & Co. signature.
That's beautiful. On the wrist today, I have my Rolex Oyster Perpetual 39 Red Grape. I know Eric loves this watch, but he's more of a vintage guy, as I am as well.
It's the John P. Rolex.
Well, I certainly like to think so anyway.
Yeah.
So why don't we jump into these watches? What is the first Rolex Domino's watch we're going to be covering here?
This is a Rolex Air King reference 5500. So if you, I guess, collector notes, it's got a very large Domino's logo above 6 o'clock, and it kind of is pixelated. It's not the sharpest or crispest really look at the dial. A few things I look for with these. One, for sort of all of them, I like to see an engraving on the back that would be the franchise owner's initials. Sometimes you see, and I'll show you, the TSM, which is for Thomas S. Monahan. He was the founder and CEO of Domino's, who kind of started this challenge. So the 80s ones, of course, still have the acrylic crystal. It's a 4-digit watch.
It's a classic 5500 with a Domino's logo on the dial.
Exactly.
And an engraving on the
Yes, yep. And there are fakes, so you need to watch out for that. This one is particularly special because, it includes the letter from Thomas S. Monahan with this kind of gold foil printing.
That's actually very interesting. It's unique.
Yeah, and basically says what the target was.
It's a shame it doesn't come with a pizza, right?
Yeah, well, I'll throw one in. But and it includes the punched paper. Actually, these are not punched papers, but the typed papers, which is correct.
Very cool.
This is the secret Rolex code for production. I don't know if you knew that.
Interesting.
With the letters, which you can find online, kind of secret thing. These were all sold through Schlander and Sons in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where Domino's is headquartered. So you've got to see the Schlander and Sons, which is no longer a Rolex.
The original 5500.
And later, they only lost their Rolex dealer license about 2 years ago, is my understanding.
Wow.
So,
well, maybe they'll start selling pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand they sell just as quickly. So
Yep.
Why don't we run on to this next example? Looks a lot the same, but why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, so as you go from the 80s into the 90s, the logo becomes a little smaller and becomes more crisp when you look at it. Also, this one is kind of interesting because the dial, which is silver, has turned sort of a silvery rose hue, kind of a pinkish hue. So it's not quite tropical, but it is a color change dial, if you will. And I've seen a number of these,
the logo hasn't changed very much. Just the
and which is nice. And the logo is smaller. It is still on its side. And then this one also has the engraving on the back, which is great. And it's got
nice.
TO and then TSM for Thomas S. Monahan. And then you go to the more recent version. These are both reference 14000s, or 14,000 as it's sometimes called.
Now, what year or range of years is this from? This has the papers.
Yeah, 96 then to 97.
So this is much more modern. This is a much more modern watch.
Yeah, so you'll
Although it
see
looks
that.
similar.
Yes.
But that's Rolex,
and
right?
this is 96. So you see this change. The Domino's logo is now at an angle, like the famous angle, like a diamond, and it's kind of small. This still has a T-Swiss made T dial, which matches for the era. And then shortly thereafter, they switched to Swiss made dials with the Super Luminova. Again, this has the engraving on the back. I personally wouldn't really buy one without the engraving. Most you see have that polished off because dealers would polish them off since people didn't want these.
Sure.
And we'll talk a little bit about
They even take the dials out and put a different dial in because truly until recently no one wanted these watches.
Yes. So there's all kinds of loose dials that are floating out there that suddenly people realized were valuable. No one wanted the dials even for like $50 or $100.
Right, it's a pizza company.
And now people are asking $2,000 plus for the dials. So all these dealers that took them out of watches are putting them in watches, which aren't correct, and offering them around. It's a really unusual thing. It's actually kind of similar to what happened to mill subs in the past in the UK. Again, no one wanted the fixed bars, the fully graduated bezel, the dials with the T on it. So dealers back in the day would honestly throw those parts away, which are now worth astronomical sums. Just the aluminum bezel inserts $50,000 plus for a mill sub.
So it's a scarcity thing, like vintage in general.
Yeah. But there's a lot of
there's less.
Exactly. So there's a lot of Frankenstein stuff. I really like to have these full set if possible.
Now look at this tiny petite little Domino's watch for I imagine a feminine pizza delivery lady.
Yeah, not the delivery lady probably, but franchise owner. But yeah, it's cool.
Understood.
Again, with the engraving on the back.
I think it looks amazing. You can't really even tell from a distance. It's got a smaller dial. You can't even tell that it's a.
And then you
Domino's
look closely. Logo. It's got it on the angle. This one's from 1999. Also, all these watches have the original papers, which helps, show the trend, Schlander and Sons in Ann Arbor, Michigan, etc. Also with the engraving on the back. So it's, these were made throughout time as well. Obviously, these sell for a lot less than the larger version.
Sure.
But they're still awesome.
Very interesting.
And then starting around 2000, they switched to
the bracelet.
Watches with the logo on the bracelet. And you have an interesting anecdote, I guess.
I remember, when I started getting into watches, I would see watch dealers actually polish off and use brushes and different tools to rip off the Domino's logo from the bracelet. And it would happen all the time. I would see dealers trade these watches and people would kind of sigh, oh no, I have to take this watch, and they'd pay less for it. And they'd scrape the Domino's logo right off the bracelet.
And then you can see it's attached.
Up until a few years ago.
Yes, and these do not trade for much of a premium. Watches with this because it's essentially just a normal Air King, but it's got this bracelet. Collectors haven't really gone crazy for these yet. They don't really trade at any sort of premium compared to those with the logo on the dial.
And the thing is, they put the Domino's logo on one of the non-removable links. So for you guys out there that are thinking, oh, I'll just remove the link. They thought of this.
Yes.
And they want you to remember Domino's Pizza when you're looking at your wrist.
Exactly. And my understanding is they still do that on watches to this day.
They do. I've seen them.
Yep.
And people occasionally still do polish off the logo.
Yes.
But I like it. I think it's interesting and cool.
It is. So this is the Array collector perspective. I would like to get one with the initials engraved on the back. The initials were actually done by Excellence Engraving in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is cool. This box shows where it was done.
Fully comprehensive.
And they're just a neat thing because they were never for public sale. They were purely for franchise owners. And these franchise owners were often very proud of these watches.
Sure.
And they'd wear them a lot, till pass them on to future generations. It's kind of funny, like I said, just to talk about values, when I got into the watches over a decade ago, these were trading for like less than $2,000.
Sure.
And recently Christie sold one watch only for $20,000. They're routinely selling in the high teens.
The 5500.
And all of them. Yeah, honestly, all of them. The older ones were slightly more, but any of them with the Domino's logo dial, ideally full set. But like I said, the one that sold at Christie's was watch only.
Are you thinking about opening up a franchise?
Just to get the watch? No, maybe if they still had the logo on the dial.
Well, it's something to consider for the future.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And
But-
Rolex doesn't do logos on dials for anything, basically, now. And that was part of that transition about 20 years ago. They use Tudor now for some of those special watches with logos on the dial, but not many. Whereas in the past, it was a big part of the Rolex business, these kind of custom dials for Domino's, for Winn-Dixie, for their truckers, for AB Trucking, all these
Sure.
random oil companies, Halliburton. They could order a group of watches with custom dials, and it doesn't happen now.
Great. Well, you seem to have quite the Domino's collection.
Thank you.
But thank you for showing this to me. Thank you for showing this to our viewers out there. Let us know what you think about the Domino's watches in the comments below. And also, if you'd like to see Eric back on a future episode, you like the previous video that we did, link in the description below, where we talk about all these very rare vintage watches that are some of the most spectacular watches that I think we've ever shown on this channel. So check out that video as well. Let us know what you think of him, and we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P. with Eric Wind.
Thank you.